Hello and welcome to another edition of Game Warp. I'm joined as always by my co-host Miss Kim Lowe.
Hey everyone!
Today we're looking at a featured game for July, which is Oxenfree. This is a game that Kim picked out for us to look at for this month, so thank you very much to Kim for that.
I always pick these weird games that you've never heard of.
This was certainly the case when we were compiling the list of games, and because you tend to focus more on like mobile gaming and indie gaming, you were coming out all these titles, and I felt like such a noob to gaming because I had no clue what any of these titles were. But this was certainly one of the standout titles that, as soon as I saw it, I was like, "Yes, we have to look at this game," because it looked just so graphically fascinating, and the story just sounded awesome as well. If you're not obviously familiar with Oxenfree, it's a coming-of-age tale and supernatural thriller combined. And you play Alex, who's this rebellious teenage girl who's going off with her friends to this overnight party on a decommissioned military island. And while they're there, they unwittingly open a ghostly rift, which is spawned from the island's cryptic past. And you basically have to find a way to close the rift, which is causing these ghosts to cause all kinds of havoc, rewinding time, and causing general chaos. While obviously uncovering the secrets of the island, while you try to obviously make it through to the next day. This is a game which fans of like the Telltale games will certainly lap up, and I think it's kind of fitting really when you look at the studio behind it, which is Night School Studio, which is made up of both alumni from both Telltale games and Disney Studios. So it's kind of unsurprising really that they would carry across that sort of choice-based and consequence-based system through to their first game here. Kim, what was it that first obviously drew you to Oxenfree though?
I'd have to say one, it's because it's a side-scrolling platformer, and I'm a huge fan of that. Second would be the choice-based, for sure. I love dialogue, I love a good story, and the story is interesting because it talks about these friends who go for an overnight party at this old military island. And they bring their radio along to recept this ghost, these weird frequencies that have been rumored to be on that island. And the thought of it turning paranormal, of having these ghost spirits, and that's about all that we really know before you even enter the game, and that's all the description you get, is that they open up a channel by mistake that unleashes this cryptic past of evil spirits. And I think that that's a really nice like premise to be in. At the same time, I mean, you can't deny the fact that there is some amazing voice talent behind it. I'm a huge fan like of the Wolf Among Us from Telltale games. So Aaron Yvette and Gavin Hammond, which played Snow White and the Beast respectively,
Yep.
played two of the voices there, and it's a lot to look up to because like I mean the studio, like you mentioned before, is from Telltale Games, I don't know how you say it, like people who worked at Telltale Games, and then there was also people who worked at like Disney. So it's a really nice, like, it seems like it has a lot of strength behind it to make a viable game. Not to mention, I don't know if I mentioned, like the art style is amazing, like just the colors and like I don't know how to describe the art, but it looks so cartoony in a way, but in like a comic strip format, and it's just looks so charming.
The closest I've come to describing the art style, I would say it's very similar to Scott Pilgrim. If anyone who's familiar with the original comic books for Scott Pilgrim, it reminds me a lot of that sort of color scheme and just the character design. And I don't know whether it's the fact our main character, like Ramona, has blue hair, where I sort of drew that sort of comparison. But certainly with the graphic style, I mean, here we've got original art by Heather Gross, who has really given the game a distinctive style. It's not so much a pixel art which you would expect with an indie game. It's more of a hand-drawn style, and something that we haven't really seen outside of like the Guilty Gear games and Blaze Blue, that sort of hand-drawn animation style. So to see it put into this sort of game, a sort of side-scrolling platformer, really was something kind of interesting, much like the decisions your character make or come up above the character's head in speech bubbles with a different color allocated to the keys on your pad. So you have a lot of control over the sort of character that you play Alex as. Whether she comes across bitchy, whether she's friendly, whether she's sort of shy and so retiring, you sort of have that sort of control. And at the same point, this was also one of my main issues with the game and with the dialogue, where characters would often speak and you never seem to get a clear space to actually put your little input in. So it often felt that you were butting into conversation until you sort of got used to the timings of the dialogue. I mean, Kim, how did you find the dialogue in particular?
Well, that was also one of my concerns. I think it was more the fact that it kind of forced you, especially the beginning of the game. I feel that by the end of the game, they kind of regulated where your bubble gets bigger, the one that you chose, until a crucial part of the conversation of that person talking is done, and then your character will, like Alex, will start talking. But in the beginning, that is one of the things is that it also doesn't give you a very long time to make your decision. There was once that like I was just so caught up in listening to them talk that I actually missed my cue to choose what I had to say. And it was after that lesson, like that happened, that I would press that cue right away. And that's when you lose, like you chop off some other character's conversation, and then you wonder, just sitting, well, I can't go back now. I don't know. I don't know what they were meant to say.
One of the early scenes early on, you're at a bonfire party and they're playing kind of truth or dare sort of game where you're given the option to like marry Snog or kill one of the members. And I felt it was like so early on because it asks you which of these characters you marry, and it's sort of like I've only just been introduced to these characters. I don't know which one they are, even though I have in my mind an idea of which character I would want to marry, which one I would want to slap. Note there is one character that you will want to slap repeatedly, and when given a choice of leaving her on the island, it's very hard to avoid that choice.
Well, I don't know. That sounds a little harsh. I mean, because as the game progresses on, this character we're talking about is called Clarissa, and she is kind of like preppy and annoying, but she also has a history with the main character, Alex, Alex's brother. She used to be the ex-girlfriend before the whole situation happens where her brother dies, and that all comes up early in the game, so it's not really much of a spoiler, I don't think. But at the same time, like the characters are constructed well enough. Like there's a good balance. It's kind of like going into a slasher flick. I guess that's the best comparison I can find, where there's a good balance of all the characters. One character is quiet, one character is, more bitchy. Some guy is like more of the chatter person, and one is more like kind of just more closed in and just picking up the situation. And our character is kind of the person who's going to pull the balance between everything.
I think you said it right there in regards to the balance, because one of the ongoing problems within the game is that you have this character Jonas who plays Alex's stepbrother. Now, when they're first introduced, it's a situation that's only sort of just been introduced, so Alex still hasn't really accepted her stepbrother Jonas, and you kind of over the course of the game you can like say whether they get closer or whether they just remain like with this icy distance between them. And ultimately, while the game seems to give you lots of options for what you can and can't do, there's ultimately only two endings to this game, certainly from the version we were playing. I believe it has now been changed to the recent DLC so that you have more endings. But certainly from the game we were playing, just the standard version, it seemed you only have really sort of two options. You play either like a bitchy version or you play the nice version. I don't know whether this is a good or a bad thing because I certainly felt playing the game that you had multiple of options. It just kind of a bit frustrating when you review get your sort of feedback at the end that it could only been sort of one or two endings that you could have got, despite the game obviously saying, giving this impression there was multiple endings that you could have come away with.
I think that that's the problem. I think that's the main thing is that when I played The Wolf Among Us and I did a review of it on That Moment In, that was one of the main issues I had was that Telltale Games gives you the illusion. Most Telltale games have that problem is that they give you the illusion that there's a choice and that your choice will change certain situations. And that's true. It applies the same to Oxenfree, where the choices you make, say, will lead to an ending where either your ending essentially doesn't change. There is only one ending. And it's an ending that, it's rather a surprise. It's kind of like a mind trip in a way as well. It kind of like it's hard to pinpoint what it actually means. It seems a little cryptic, I'm not sure. Like it kind of wowed me the ending, but the thing is that it also does this thing where all your choices will only lead to a minor consequence at the end. Like the outcome of it, say Ren and Nona, like Ren likes Nona and will they get together is based on some of the choices of dialogue that you make during the game. The other choice is whether Michael, which is Alex's brother, will be there or not. Will he survive or not? Will he be with Clarissa or not? And essentially those are the few endings that we have, but the general ending doesn't change, and that's really a bummer because when I got to make all these choices in dialogue, the only effect is on these small things that I don't really care about, I guess, in the end. Like I do, but like it doesn't change the general ending. Like I think the ending is very brilliant, but at the same time I would have liked to see that it had a little bit more different direction, I guess. Like,
I know what you mean because the end of the game, it's really the main outcome of your actions. Really, just affects the relationship these characters end on. Which ones will still be friends? Which ones will get together? And the actual main ending itself, it's not like our previous feature game, Life is Strange, where you have two very distinct endings, depending on obviously that final choice in that game. With Oxenfree, it's more the relationship these characters will have at the end of the game that your choices will affect. And it's obviously interesting the fact that you can obviously, it essentially means you're going to play for the game through twice. One to have sort of where you play the nice version of Alex, and one where you play sort of like the evil version of Alex. And at the same time, there is a moment towards the end of the game where you have the option to save a brother's life, but the way the dialogue is done, it requires you to be paying attention to the story so that you know which events to obviously change to obviously save his life. And even though it's obviously presented just like a series of just conversational options, there are obviously options there that things you can push him to take. So such as like whether he chooses to stay and study in town, you can save his relationship, or whether he chooses to go away to school, that will obviously affect his ultimate fate. And I love the fact that it wasn't sort of like highlighted that, oh, if you do this, then you're going to save his life. If you don't do this, then obviously he's going to die. It was sort of like, if you've been paying attention to what these characters have been saying, you will know what led up to his demise, and obviously how you can sort of work around that. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
yeah, it is. I really do like the fact that like I like generally stories that give you that freedom to make your choice because it's kind of like you're really being Alex now. You're making you're choosing the dialogue that you want on how to progress in this situation. Everybody's going to be different. It's going to make Alex distinct in a certain way. I think the only other issue I had was that like it sounds like we're bashing the game like crazy right now. But we're like I actually really like the game, but there are certain mechanics that I thought could have been used a little bit better. Definitely there was like the rewinding time, and then there was that whole music recording thing that you had to do at a certain pace. Those were used a lot, but I actually thought that in the beginning of the game, I'm not sure if it was just to emphasize the point of that you needed to be pay attention to detail because right when we get into the first, like we realize that this is turning into like a ghost trip type of thing, Jonas gets possessed, and then we go through this quiz thing where the spirits give you a quiz, and it's like a hangman deal that you have to do. And I thought that was so original, but they just never, like I kept worrying that it would come back in some way where they would do something like that, and then I became really aware of all the detail. I'm not sure if you felt like you thought that it would come back or not.
Oh, definitely. Within the sort of core of Oxenfree, we have this really great ghost story, and that's something we haven't really seen in just any sort of media recently. So the fact that we found it in this small little indie game, this ghost story that's not only effective, but actually generally terrifying in places. I remember when we were obviously sending emails back and forth, sort of as we were sort of playing the game, And the amount of times I said I've been like so freaked out by this game, I'm like playing at 11 o'clock at night, and I'm freaked out because the combination of sound and visuals is just like really sort of messing with my mind. And but Oxenfree will get in your head, even though there's no gore, there's no violence as such. There's so many little moments, such as the aforementioned Hangman game that you play at the military base, where you've been given all the information as you've gone around and looked at different locations. It's given you all the information, and the fact that it draws back on that information, such as asking you the amount of crew on this ship, what code word that's used by radio men. You at the same time you've got all these like handprints appearing on like the blackboard behind you, and it's so unbelievably creepy. Such as whenever one of the characters randomly gets possessed, it's or they rewind time suddenly, so you find yourself in this loop. It really does a number on you, and even as sort of like an established horror fan, it was kind of nice to actually find a game that was able to capture that horror element. And I think really not since sort of like the early Silent Hills, like the early Resident Evil games before they became really action based, that you had that sort of level of intensity within a horror game, even though from all appearances you wouldn't really class it as being a horror game, but it has got a really nice horror element to it, especially the ghost story element, which certainly isn't one of the easier sort of genres to work with, really.
Did you ever think to yourself during those looping and looping sequences that when the screen started becoming like those tracking lines on it? I don't know, like maybe some of our audience is young enough that they've never had a VHS and VCR and they've never had to deal with tracking. Those lines were never a threat in my life until this game came around, and I was like, oh my God, when I see it, I was like, oh God, we're in another time loop.
Whenever you go into one of these moments, it's only you have to tune the radio to create the ghost to appear, and you scroll through the dial, and you can suddenly hear this like throbbing vibration sound as like these geometric shapes that cause these rifts to appear. But the fact that you have to go, there's some points where you have to go through this. There's no avoiding it to proceed. You have to tune into the ghost signal, and it's this creeping dread of what's going to be coming next. As you sort of slowly move the dial, it's a really effective moment. Just the whole use of radio in particular, the fact that you can tune into different frequencies and you can catch the little snippets of radio plays. There's certain frequencies which give you like a guided tour of the islands, and there's another which will tell you where these hidden letters are that you have to locate. So the use of the radio frequency in particular was just really inspiring. I love the fact it appears above your character's head as a little radio dial that you have to tune in. I thought that was just such a nice little touch.
Yeah, and it never gives you like clear instructions. Like certain times you're like, okay, well, maybe when you're stuck, you're like, okay, well, maybe it's time to use the radio, but it never gives you like the cue that you need to, except when you see like the triangle above your head. And at the same time, like going back to, what you were talking about, like tuning into the radio frequencies, and you can actually get the story of the island in like a guided tour. That was one of the things that I think intrigued me the most was the attention to detail of just making everything. You literally learned about the island. You learned about as you go through these tours, you also learn about like every single landmark has their own little bits of history, and they lead to something that might help you solve certain puzzles. And at the same time, it also pieces together kind of what happened to these ghost spirits which are on this island. And then on top of that, like when you're tuning through the radio, the most unsettling part is the music. Like just that it's like the radio sound, the soundtrack that they have for it as we're going through that, whether it's possession or whether it's like the geometric figures and you're piecing it together. And I don't know if Xbox has this, but PS4, like we knew where it was the right spot because your controller would vibrate more and more
Yeah.
as you got closer to it. And I think it was just so well done and so creepy. On top of that, like the atmosphere that it had was a little like, I don't know, it felt really dark. And for the most part, we were in a lot of dark places, I guess. So it's just I just think it's done really well. I mean, obviously, like I think that the story and the dialogue, would you like, is done really well? Would you say that that's the case?
The dialogue in particular is really sharp, and it's very natural as well with the dialogue. It's not these sort of feelings where you're being asked to like ask ridiculous questions and everything like that. It's all designed so that it flows and it feels like you are following this group of kids. That these are sort of natural conversations that they have, and the fact that they do antagonize each other, the fact that they are bitchy to each other, and especially the fact that you have so much control over the sort of tone Alex chooses to take. And when I was playing it, I was just having to play this sort of whip smart wise ass. When I was playing it, just because that's the sort of character I want to see. But you obviously have, you can see just from the options that you have dialogues, you can tune it, sort of craft the sort of experience you want to have from the game, so you can make it sound scared. You can have a like encounter these spooky situations with like some smart ass comment. You can mix it up and not overly affect the end result. You have a lot of freedom with the dialogue selection, so that you can have a more naturalistic response rather than thinking, "Oh, I have to have a constantly say funny things, otherwise I'm gonna screw up the ending." You do have a lot of freedom, obviously, with the dialogue that you have, and I thought that was certainly something that added to the game. And I think one of the most disarming things about the game is the fact that you've got a very sort of Dago Pascal, sort of pastel coloured game, and that you have these very dark moments, and these two ideas shouldn't go together. And I think this is why it keeps you constantly on so on edge. Much like the music is never sort of like,
Overpowering.
yeah, it never sort of telegraphs any particular moment. It sort of like comes out of nowhere or slowly fades in as you find yourself getting drawn deeper into situations. So when it really becomes evident, you're already too deep into the situation to sort of back yourself out. You have no warning. I mean, there's several moments where the ghosts have possessed a character and they force them to do something, and it completely shocked me. Because you look at this game and you think the way it's designed and the way it looks, that, this is very Dayglow, this is all very happy, these characters are only going to get like pestered by ghosts and then something to happen. And I'm trying to avoid spoilers here by saying one particular scene, but when it happened, I was like, oh, I was not expecting that at all. And I'd actually thought that I'd lost this character. And I was like, wow, like, these characters can die now?
Because that's the thing is, like, makes this game really good is like Oxenfree takes the time to. I guess it never specifies. It always only drops clues for you to discover, and that keeps you intrigued into continuing on this journey about where you need to go and all the things that you can find. You never know what to expect.
Yeah.
It takes these turns, it takes these surprise twists, and it does it throughout the entire game. It's not just like your ending that's a twist, which it is a twist. If you even stay like after, I think it's after like that, there's like the final scene, and then we jump into an even more final kind of scene. You get
Yeah.
like, it's like as the credits are rolling, even I think it's just right before it cues the credits or somewhere around there.
Yeah. I mean, we should stress that while it is a twist, it's a good twist. It's not like an M. Night Shyamalan twist where it's a twist for the sake of having a twist. It makes sense and makes you sort of think about what you've just obviously played and what actually has happened, what that ending actually means. So while there are twists, they are decent twists. They're not there just for the sake of pulling the rug from underneath your feet and going, oh, look how smart we are, look what we did here. All the dialogue, all the path that you choose to take, it all makes sense. There's nothing nonsensical, even though there are a couple of the loop sections which I just thought, oh, can we just be getting on to the next thing? I don't want to be doing a ghost section here. I just want to get to the next point. This is just delaying where we need to be. And that kind of brings me on to the next point, and that's the navigation of the island, which I found to be kind of a pain in the ass, mainly because the map makes zero sense. All you have is basically these arrows saying which areas you can sort of access from one area to the next. And it seems to take forever. There's a couple of moments at least where you have to walk from one end of the map to the other, and the fact that these characters pretty much just walk everywhere at a leisurely pace, it's sort of like, come on, we need to be getting somewhere. This is taking too much time. I don't know if it annoyed you, Kim, or whether it's just me who was in the sort of rush to get to the next bit, or...
I think that it was just the beginning that we got a little confused, like a little turned around, because there's one, as particularly one section where it was like the military base building and the forest. There's like a fence in between until eventually we get access to it.
Yeah.
But it's particularly there that we have to do a detour, and then you get a little confused. You eventually get a grasp of where you need to go and what paths go to where, and encourages you to kind of explore a little too that way. I didn't have much of an issue with that. I did feel that certain areas could have been done a little better, I guess. I don't know. I mean, I didn't have an issue with the map. I didn't think that that was anything that bothered me too much. Obviously, it's frustrating when your characters are only walking and walking and walking, and you got to walk up 1,000 places, and it's just crazy.
It's like, can we have a little urgency here, people? You know, we are
Yeah.
supposed in this dangerous situation. No, no. Oh, just have a nice stroll.
It's like a stroll through the military island.
I love looking at where the characters actually move as well, especially when it involves them jumping or climbing.
Yeah.
Those are all really nice movements there. There's a number section where you're jumping from rock to rock, and I thought that was really nice. I mean, it's not when we say it's a platform, it's not like you're playing Mario where if you miss a ledge you're gonna die. I don't think there's any way to actually die on this game, is there? It's more just a story on rails that you play through and you sort of make choices as to where you sort of go and what you obviously say. There's no actual way to kill your character unless you've found some way, Kim.
No, but there was one part which was really funny. I don't know if it was supposed to be scripted that way or not, but I actually had my character when I was playing Alex in one of those bigger jumps. I didn't see the path that I think underneath if you took the path, it would have been a safer route for her to jump. But the other one was like she jumped and then like she was just like hanging on the rock for a
Yeah,
moment and then Jonas is in the back and he's like, "Whoa, I didn't know you could do that jump," or makes like snarky comment about that. And I thought that was really entertaining to see. But I don't know. Definitely there wasn't any way to kill your character. I think it was scripted in a way that the ghost spirits were trying to get something out of you, and they were doing it in a way where unless they wanted you to die, they didn't want Alex to die. Pretty much, like they weren't looking for her to die.
no, they tend to just basically screw around with mainly Jonas. Jonas is the one that they seem to love screwing around with. I've never seen a character get possessed as much as Jonas does over the course of this game. I think him and Ren, if there's someone's going to get possessed, it's normally one of those two that's going to get possessed.
But I mean, you'd have to disagree, or because one of the first characters to get possessed was Clarissa, and she's pretty much kind of like she's possessed the whole game. There's only a few moments where she isn't. When you say like getting possessed, she's like just possessed once and forever.
I suppose so. I suppose because we don't really have, out of all the characters, we don't really have that much interaction with her outside of the opening scene. And their relationship, I thought, was very well scripted. The fact that she obviously resents and blames Alex for her brother's death, well, her former boyfriend's death, should I say, and just how their relationship progresses over the course of the game. The fact that Alex feels compelled to help her, even though she's pretty much in the mindset that she's just kind of a bitch and would rather kind of leave her to the ghost. And there's an option that comes up, and I unfortunately didn't choose it. I wish I had now, where it gives you the option of leaving her on the island because you have a boat. Then I wasn't sure if you could actually take the boat and escape. Unfortunately, decided to do the right thing, so to speak, and continue the quest the normal way. And unfortunately, yeah, I think it's going to be one of those things that when I go back, I'm going to obviously see what would happen there. And it's kind of nice the fact that you have these moments you kind of want to go back and replay and see how it would have gone a different way, even with the prior knowledge that you know ultimately it's all going to pretty much end the same way. There's still enough there to give it at least a second playthrough, I would say.
So now that we've talked about all these characters in the game, who is your favorite character?
I think Ren was one of my favorite characters, even though she is really withdrawn for a lot of it. I felt that she was just this fascinating character, and I kind of wanted to do more. So when you have the option of choosing either the guys or leaving them in the tower, I just enjoyed leaving them in the tower because they were so funny when they were just together, because they're just like this old married couple just like bicker all the time between them. So I just felt more amusing to leave them in the tower, and in doing so you find out all this information about her backstory and who she is, and I thought that was just really sort of fascinating. But I just love her character design. I mean,
Yeah, for me it would be Alex, but I also like I had this really, I guess it's a fascination of wanting Alex and Jonas to, kind of be good friends, like good brother and sister, whatever. Like to have a good relationship, I guess, in the end.
yeah.
Because it seems like, the story is kind of like you do after you learn about her brother actually and what happens and all that stuff, there's kind of this thing where Jonas doesn't seem like a bad guy, you know? He's, you know, for some guy who just like lands in in a random family and has to adapt to this whole new place and has to and all of a sudden gets dragged off to this island and gets stuck in this disaster just that you know she created. It's kind of like it doesn't and he's really trying, like he it seems like a solid character where he's really trying to make things work. The only thing was I really like the fact that all the characters, you know, the whatever you said, and if there was some like you had some sort of reaction from the characters, your face would have a bubble on top of their head. It was a cute mechanic, I
Yeah.
think.
Oh, definitely. And I mean, did you get the feeling that as you go on that if you were obviously selecting the option to try and get Alex and Jonas to become closer, the fact that as it went on they actually were getting as sort of stepbrother and sister, it did actually feel that the choices I was making in regards to their relationship were obviously making a difference, and that these two characters were actually growing closer. It wasn't that you're just using throwaway dialogue and the game would obviously decide on its own. It did obviously
Yeah.
feel that there was a connection definitely growing with, especially as the story progresses and what they go through. It seems that this whole incident that takes place over the course of this night only seems to push them further together, and it's sort of like this weird bonding experience they're going to have. It'd be like, you know, that one time that you got possessed on that military institute. Probably not the best bonding experience, but certainly it works for this story.
I guess it emphasizes the point of through thick and thin, right? All these friends have gone through a life and death situation,
Yeah,
and it really ends up being like the ending will determine whether, you know, you're going to be with everybody or, you know, you're going to stay friends with everybody or not. And that, I think that because we've grown to love all the characters so much and connected with so many of the characters, I think it's a piece of everybody. Like everybody has a piece of themselves in each of these characters
yeah,
that you've connected to them as you play the game. You really care about their outcome and you really want to see in the end, like, what is the end game of where this is going? Because at a certain point, it feels like it's just so out of hand, you know, like everything's just crazy, you know, it's just out of control. And you kind of want to know where does this stop? Like, when does this
yeah.
stop? And how does it stop?
Oh, and I love the fact that as the story's going, the more encounters you have with the ghosts of this island, the more you sort of learn about their history and what they're obviously trying to achieve. And the fact that it slowly pieces it all together. It's not like we get to the end and we have this huge exposition sort of info dump of like, oh, this is what it all meant, and it's sort of, it as you go along, you slowly get a little more information each time you have one of these encounters, and they, no matter how many times it happens, they still manage to keep it fresh, the scares fresh, that same sort of tension. It's not you ever get more used to it. It seems to, in some ways, it comes a little more intense, although it's not obvious that it's becoming more intense. The actual pressures of it. I think it's the games that you play. They seem to have more weight to them as they go on. It starts off with Hangman. By the end, you're playing hide and seek with these ghosts, where you're obviously running around the house trying to find objects based on the clues that they give you to try and release each of your friends from this possession. And they put such weight on it, you think that, oh, if I get this wrong, that something's going to happen. I'm going to lose one of this group members. So yeah, it's got some fun puzzles, and it's just generally the tone, the styling, everything. It just makes me wish that more people were talking about it. But at the moment, it seems to still be one of those games which is under the radar, it would seem.
When it first released, I think that there were quite a bit of people that played it. I think there were quite a bit of YouTubers that were aware of it. I guess more indie game oriented ones. I'm glad that we finally did this and we played this, and it was such a, you know. But I'd like to know, what is your score for Oxenfree?
Oxenfree, I'm going to give it 4 out of 5. The reason for not scoring it higher is just obviously those loop sections and the frustrations I had with the map. The dialogue I can get past, mainly because you get used to it. You tune your sort of ear into how and when to respond, so that wasn't so much of an issue. And I love the look of the game, and I love the story, and the general tenseness and scariness of it. It was just obviously just those few points that just sort of took away from it, and especially towards the end where you kind of like, okay, we're on the final sort of stretch now. I just kind of want to get to the end of this, but we keep encountering all these hurdles that are just sort of like dragging out that little bit longer. That sort of distracts me. But no, I would give it a solid 4 out of 5.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I give it a 4.5 out of 5 because I think it was wildly apparent during the game because I kept messaging you about it. I haven't been engaged in, like, so engaged and entertained and just absorbed by a game in a really long time. And Oxenfree just does so much right. Like you said, the art, I mean, the soundtrack, the story is so detailed, the place they're in, everything is done so well. The voice acting also. I mean, the little thing we talked about the dialogue and all that sort of thing, and maybe more endings. I think that that's still very minor in this situation. One of the points I did talk to you about that you didn't quite agree with, I guess, is that Oxenfree and Life is Strange has a whole point of difference in my rating, and that's because Life is Strange disappointed me, whereas Oxenfree was above what I expected. And I think that's why right now 4.5 is where I feel like I'm just so excited about this game that I almost wanted to like jump back in and play it one
Yeah,
again, you know?
I think I would be quicker to jump back into replaying Oxenfree than Life is Strange, and I think it's mainly down to the fact that Oxenfree is a lot lighter. It didn't feel that I was being bogged down in sections, or that it ever sort of grinded to a halt. It always felt that the game was constantly flowing, and it's got a relatively short runtime, so it's not like it's going to really eat into your sort of gaming time. And I guess that you could, if you were dedicated enough, you could do it in one sitting. I did it in multiple sittings, just obviously due to timing. But it was not, even though breaking it up, the game never felt that it was sort of like you lost anything by breaking it up. The fact that you could dip in and out of it, and it constantly was able to pick up and maintain its tone. So just on obviously our going off our rankings at the moment, I would certainly put this above Life is Strange, and certainly is a game I look forward to going back and getting those last few achievement points for the game. The playthrough I did, I certainly enjoyed it, and yeah, it was a good pick, Kim.
Thanks so much for everyone for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, subscribe, and comment. We'd love to hear your feedback on whether you played Oxenfree or on our episodes or any game recommendations. You can head over to our home base at thatmomentin.com to read more gaming reviews and news bits. There you can also find movie and book reviews. At the same time, to get up-to-date gaming news and releases every single day, you can follow us on Twitter and like us on Facebook at Game Warp Podcast. You're going to see this on the nice little subscription card on the top right now.
Yeah, our featured game for August is another Kim's picks, because she's clearly the one in tune when it comes to picking out the games. This is a game which we are going purely off the trailer. We've had no further sort of details, and that's Song of the Deep, which is another indie game. And this one, we know very little outside of what we've seen in the trailer, so I'm looking forward to it.
I think everybody's starting to see a pattern. So, so tune in to us soon for next month. And yeah, that's it for this episode. Bye.